And so we begin today in the UK, where Rishi Sunak has become the country's new Prime Minister. He's made his first speech in the role and is now setting about the task of forming his government. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer becomes the UK's 57th Prime Minister after being invited to form a government by King Charles III earlier today. He is, of course, Britain's third Prime Minister since April and enters Downing Street as the youngest leader in over 2 centuries and quite possibly the wealthiest person ever to occupy the UK's top political job. At the age of just 42, he promised to bring stability and unity to Britain as he addressed the country in front of that famous Downing Street front door.
But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them. And that work begins immediately.
Hours earlier, his predecessor Liz Truss gave a short farewell speech, saying it had been a huge honour for her to serve as Prime Minister despite her very brief tenure in the role. Liz Truss resigned after her mini-budget of tax cuts funded by debt sent shockwaves through global financial markets, reducing the pound to a record low and costing the country billions in emergency financial assistance after yields on government bonds soared. Within days, Truss U-turned, fired her finance minister. His successor then scaled back a cap on soaring energy bills that have contributed heavily to a cost of living crisis for tens of millions of people across the UK. Prime Minister Sunak today sought to project himself as a rock of stability. He said that while the country faces a profound economic crisis, he has the seriousness and tenacity to confront it. Now he's choosing his cabinet, always a complicated process, but this time even more so, given the divisions that have almost torn the governing Conservative Party asunder. The new UK Prime Minister is expected to keep at least some current cabinet ministers in their posts, including Jeremy Hunt, the man drafted in by Liz Truss to take over as Chancellor earlier this month. Penny Mordaunt, one of Sunak's leadership rivals, is also expected to receive an important role in Cabinet, possibly Foreign Secretary. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, one of the few Cabinet Secretaries to keep his job during both the administrations of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, he may stay on to keep watch over the Ukraine crisis. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman may make a Cabinet return after supporting Sunak's leadership bid. Kemi Badenoch, the UK Trade Secretary, is popular within the Conservative Party and may retain her role or be promoted. Former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab came out early in support of the new UK leader. There has been speculation that he could become Deputy Prime Minister, but there are also reports now that he may make a return to the Ministry of Justice. Of this, let's go live to Danny Hewson, AJ Bell financial analyst, who joins us live from the British city of Huddersfield. Danny Hewson, thanks very much indeed for being with us today. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about precisely which figures will fill which roles in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, but there is no speculation about the main message that he was delivering earlier today, and that is basically the claim that he is the man who can fix the disastrous state into which Britain has fallen over the last several months.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last several months have really been dire for the UK economy. And there's no doubt that he has a tough job to do. And he's made no bones about the fact that he knows that it is going to be an incredibly difficult ask for him as the new Prime Minister. He does obviously have a relationship with investors, with markets and with the British people, because he was Chancellor of the Exchequer during an incredibly difficult time for the UK during, of course, COVID lockdowns. And he was responsible for bringing in the furlough scheme, among others, which helped keep British people basically in a job during what was a very difficult time indeed. So he has said, yes, there will be difficult decisions to make, but he has appealed to markets saying that he understands the importance of fiscal responsibility.
And Danny Hewson, what is he going to do about disunity within the Conservative Party? There's been obviously lots of talk today about trying to unite the party around his leadership, with some figures close to Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, and indeed Boris Johnson himself today saying it's time for everyone to unite. But that's today. What happens tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, he is going to have to work incredibly hard to make this government work. We've seen over the last few months what happens to a country which basically doesn't have anyone with a hand on the steering wheel. And clearly, during these incredibly difficult economic time, what we need is a government that is prepared to take us in a direction and keep heading in that direction. He is going to have to reach out right across the party in order to bring people on board who maybe weren't part of Liz Truss's cabinet, to bring on board a number of people that were Liz Truss supporters. But we know that the Conservative Party is a very prickly place indeed. He is not the most popular person within that party, and he is going to have his work cut out for him.
And Danny, very briefly, what's next for the markets? All eyes on that fiscal statement that's coming at the end of the month from the now new British government?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing today will be who will be in position at number 11. It is widely anticipated that Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor who was brought in by Liz Truss to basically U-turn all those things that she put in place during the mini budget, will stay in post. That would seem likely, considering that, as you say, this new fiscal update is due on Halloween, just a few days away. That is certainly what markets need. They want to see a clear picture of the health of the UK economy. They want to be sure that any tax cuts, the spending, clearly that energy policy, which has been scaled back, they want to know what that means for the UK finances. The fact that yield costs have come down, those government borrowing costs, quite significantly since Rishi Sunak was put in post as Prime Minister, is a good sign, but there is an awfully long way to go, and markets will be watching to see what happens next.
Danny Hewson, financial analyst with AJ Bell, joining us live from the city of Huddersfield, which by chance is the birthplace of a former British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson. Danny, thanks very much indeed for being with us today.